A man sat alone in his small apartment, staring at a stack of unpaid bills. But instead of sinking into worry, he closed his eyes, took a breath, and said to himself, "I will not let my circumstances dictate my spirit." That moment became the turning point of his entire life. When you learn to control your mindset, you stop being shaped by the world and begin shaping the world within you. Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be tuning in from tonight, I want to talk to you about the one instrument that determines the direction, tone, and outcome of your entire life, your mindset. In every era, every generation, every household, there exists a hidden lever that separates those who rise from those who remain where they are. And that lever is found not in circumstance, not in luck, but in the quiet workshop of the human mind. For years, men and women have searched for secrets, secrets to success, secrets to happiness, secrets to greater meaning. Yet all the while, the greatest secret has been sitting patiently within them, waiting for recognition. The truth is simple: we live the life our mindset allows. And if we are willing to take command of our mental world, we can step into a life far greater than anything we've previously imagined. Your mind is a remarkable servant, but a relentless master. If left unchecked, it adopts whatever impressions the world offers: fear, doubt, frustration, hesitation. But when guided deliberately, it becomes a source of extraordinary power. So the question I invite you to consider is this: who is steering your thinking right now? Your intention or your environment? Most people never stop to realize they can direct their thoughts. They believe thoughts simply happen. But thoughts are choices, and choices become habits, and habits become destiny. When you adjust the way you think, you adjust the path you walk. Now, I'd like you to remember a central truth, one you can carry with you long after these words fade from the air. Where the mind goes, life follows. This is not poetry, it is law. The person who thinks deliberately lives deliberately. The person who thinks in chaos lives in chaos. This is why we must become guardians of our mental state, filtering what enters and refining what remains. Begin with awareness. Notice the tone of your thoughts. Are they building you or breaking you? Are they moving you toward your purpose or pulling you away from it? Once you become aware, introduce intention. Replace worry with planning. Replace doubt with preparation. Replace fear with action. It's astonishing how transformation begins the moment you decide to think differently. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your dominant thoughts, and this simple truth carries more power than most people will ever realize. Every day, from the moment we rise to the moment we retire, we are shaping our existence through the steady, persistent flow of ideas, beliefs, impressions, and assumptions that circulate through the mind. These thoughts are not fleeting visitors, they are architects. They design the emotional atmosphere we live in, the actions we take, and ultimately the results we experience. A man who allows his thoughts to drift aimlessly will find his life drifting in the same fashion, following the winds of circumstance rather than the direction of intention. But the man who cultivates a higher standard for the thoughts he chooses to entertain discovers that life begins to align in ways that once seemed improbable. Think for a moment about the most successful individuals you have ever encountered. They do not possess extraordinary powers, nor do they live in a world free from challenge. What separates them is that their dominant thoughts consistently revolve around possibility, responsibility, and purpose. They think in terms of what can be done rather than what cannot. They bring a certain order to their minds, and that order is reflected in every area of their lives. When you choose to elevate the quality of your thoughts, you set your entire being on a higher frequency. You become more alert, more capable, more resilient. Problems that once overwhelmed you now appear manageable, even instructive. Opportunities that once passed unnoticed now stand in clear view. It is not the world that has improved, but the lens through which you see it. A person cannot think weak thoughts and expect a strong life, nor can they dwell on fear and hope to find courage. Thoughts are seeds, and the harvest is inevitable. If you sow negativity, you'll find your days colored with frustration. If you sow self-doubt, you'll hesitate at every step. But if you choose to plant ideas of growth, confidence, and determination, your life will begin to bear fruit in alignment with those ideas. This is not wishful thinking, it is the natural consequence of mental direction. The mind is always constructing, always creating, and it takes its blueprint from the thoughts you feed it most often. Dominant thoughts become internal commands. They shape your posture, your voice, your decisions. They influence how you interpret events, how you respond to adversity, how you carry yourself in moments of pressure. And over time they form the identity you present to the world. When you realize this, you begin to take your thinking seriously. You begin to guard it the way a watchman guards a gate. You become selective, intentional. You understand that a single elevated thought can shift the course of a day, and that a consistent stream of elevated thoughts can shift the course of a lifetime. So when we speak of improving the quality of one's life, we are not referring to a distant dream or an unreachable standard. We are speaking of a practice available to every person willing to discipline the mind and direct it toward the highest expression of what they can become. Your mindset is a compass. Set it deliberately, or the world will set it for you. This truth has guided countless lives toward clarity, purpose, and achievement, yet it remains overlooked by those who move through their days unaware that their inner direction is being shaped by forces outside themselves. Every person carries within them a mental compass, quietly pointing either toward growth or toward stagnation, toward confidence or toward doubt, toward intention or toward distraction. What many do not realize is that this compass does not remain neutral. If you fail to set it on purpose, the noise of the world will gladly take over and set it for you. From the moment you open your eyes each morning, you are met with influences, some gentle, some forceful, all eager to guide the direction of your thinking. The news tells you what to fear, social pressure tells you what to value, old habits tell you what to expect, and the opinions of others attempt to define your limitations. Without conscious awareness, these influences begin nudging your compass needle little by little, until one day you find yourself heading in a direction you never chose. And it is only when you pause, reflect, and examine the state of your life that you realize how far you have drifted simply because you handed your mental navigation over to the world. But the remarkable thing about the human mind is that it responds immediately to deliberate direction. The moment you decide what matters to you, what you stand for, and what kind of life you intend to create, your internal compass begins to steady itself. It swings away from external noise and toward inner conviction. You become less reactive and more intentional. The winds of circumstance may blow, but they no longer determine your path. You determine it. For once the compass is set, every thought, every decision, every action becomes aligned with that chosen direction. Setting your mindset deliberately begins with a simple question. Where do I want my life to go? Not in vague terms, not in wishful generalities, but in clear, unmistakable direction. Just as a traveler does not embark without knowing the destination, you must decide the direction of your mental world before the journey of your daily life begins. When your thoughts are guided by a clear purpose, distractions lose their influence. The fears of others no longer sway you. The world may offer its suggestions, but it cannot take command unless you give it permission. Think of the great achievers throughout history. Their environments were no more peaceful, no less chaotic than ours today. Yet they moved forward with steady conviction because their compass pointed inward rather than outward. They trusted their direction, they guarded it, they adjusted it when necessary but never surrendered it to chance. And as a result, their lives unfolded with meaning, not by accident but by design. When you set your mindset deliberately, you reclaim the most powerful form of freedom a person can possess, is the freedom to choose the direction of your own life, no matter the circumstances surrounding it. Discipline in thinking is more powerful than discipline in action, for every action taken by a human being begins first as a silent directive issued within the mind. Long before a hand moves, a word is spoken, or a decision is carried out, there is a moment of thought, brief, subtle, and often unnoticed. And it is in that moment that the true battle of life is won or lost. Most people attempt to discipline their behavior without disciplining the thoughts that produce it, and this is why they struggle, falter, and repeat the same patterns year after year. But the person who learns to discipline the mind at its source finds that right action becomes natural action, effortless and consistent. Thinking, when left unattended, follows the path of least resistance. It drifts toward old habits, old fears, and old excuses. It gravitates to what is familiar rather than what is necessary. And so the undisciplined thinker becomes a prisoner of past conditioning, reacting to life instead of directing it. Yet the disciplined thinker is a free man or woman. They choose what they will allow into their mental world and what they will not. They recognize that the mind, like a garden, will grow weeds if not cultivated on purpose. And so they guard it, not harshly but faithfully, with a steady awareness of what supports their growth and what undermines it. To discipline your thinking is to assume responsibility for the inner dialogue that shapes your emotions, decisions, and character. It means noticing when your thoughts wander into worry and gently guiding them back to purpose. It means recognizing when discouragement begins to settle in and replacing it with a more constructive interpretation. It means refusing to indulge in mental patterns that weaken you, no matter how familiar they may feel. This is not suppression, it is refinement. It is the deliberate shaping of a mind that works for you rather than against you. Consider how much energy is wasted when thoughts are allowed to run unchecked. Hesitation that steals opportunity, doubt that stalls progress, resentment that clouds judgment. A disciplined thinker does not eliminate challenges, but they meet those challenges with a clear and organized mind. They do not allow panic to scatter their reasoning or impulse to dictate their choices. Their thoughts form a kind of inner leadership, guiding them with calm authority even in moments of uncertainty. And because their mental world is ordered, their outer world begins to follow that same order. Great achievements never begin with frantic action, they begin with steady, deliberate thinking. A disciplined mind sets priorities, chooses standards, and refuses to compromise them. It does not leap at every distraction, it remains fixed on what matters. And with time, this mental steadiness becomes a remarkable force. It strengthens character. It sharpens focus. It transforms work into mastery and goals into inevitabilities. When you cultivate discipline in thinking, you build the foundation upon which every meaningful action will stand. It is the quiet force that shapes your days, directs your energy, and leads you toward the life you are truly capable of living. Your reactions reveal your true inner conditioning. Change the conditioning and the reactions follow. This simple observation carries with it a profound truth about human behavior, one that many overlook while struggling to understand why they keep responding to life in ways that do not serve them. A reaction is not an isolated event. It is the echo of everything you have allowed into your mind, everything you have believed, repeated, feared, or accepted over time. It is the sum of your internal training. And because it is trained, it can be retrained. Because it is learned, it can be unlearned. The way you react to life today is not your destiny. It is merely your current conditioning. When a person is startled by difficulty, it is not the difficulty itself that creates turmoil, but the mental patterns they have built around challenge. When someone becomes defensive at criticism, the criticism is not the true cause. It is the beliefs they hold about themselves that determine the sting. Life does not dictate your reactions, your conditioning does. Two people can face the same problem, yet one collapses under the weight while the other grows stronger. What differs is not the problem, but the internal framework from which they respond. The interesting thing about conditioning is that it happens whether we are aware of it or not. Every repeated thought, every familiar fear, every worry entertained, every doubt rehearsed becomes part of the system that determines our responses. Most people never take the time to trace their reactions back to the thoughts that built them. They simply believe, this is just the way I am. But nothing could be farther from the truth. A person is not the product of fixed temperament, they are the product of repeated thinking. And repeated thinking, like any habit, can be shaped. Begin by observing your reactions without judgment. Notice what triggers frustration, what sparks insecurity, what ignites impatience. These reactions are clues pointing toward the conditioning that created them. Instead of battling the reaction, examine the belief beneath it. Is it rooted in fear? In old experiences? In an assumption you never questioned? Once you uncover the source, you gain the power to reshape it. You can introduce new ideas, new interpretations, new standards for how you will respond in the future. This is how inner change begins, not through force, but through awareness followed by deliberate reconditioning. A calm person is not calm because life treats them gently. They are calm because they have trained their mind to remain steady regardless of circumstance. A confident person is not confident because they have never failed. They are confident because their conditioning tells them failure is not final. A resilient person is not resilient because adversity avoids them. They are resilient because their internal framework interprets adversity as temporary and surmountable. Their reactions are not accidents, they are intentional creations. As you begin to reshape your conditioning, you will notice something extraordinary. The world appears to change, not because it has become easier, but because you have become stronger. Situations that once provoked immediate emotion now meet a mind that pauses, considers, and chooses its response deliberately. This is the mark of a person who has taken ownership of their inner world, the person whose reactions no longer betray old fears, but reflect a newly built mindset aligned with the life they intend to live. Mental focus is a muscle that grows only when challenged, and this is a truth that explains more about human progress than most people ever recognize. The average person believes focus is something you either have or do not have, as though it were a trait assigned at birth. But focus, like strength, like skill, like character, is developed through deliberate use. It strengthens when exercised and it weakens when neglected. A mind that is never challenged never grows. A mind that is consistently tested, stretched, and directed becomes capable of extraordinary clarity and endurance. Consider how easily the mind wanders when left unattended. It drifts toward distraction, temptation, entertainment, and noise. This is not failure. It is simply the mind's natural tendency to conserve energy. Focus requires effort, and effort is resisted unless purpose intervenes. When you challenge your mind, when you give it a task that demands attention, you are training it to stay present, to resist drift, to remain steady despite competing impulses. Each time you bring your mind back from distraction, you strengthen its ability to return. Each time you choose concentration over ease, you build mental stamina. One of the great misconceptions is that focus should feel comfortable. It should not. Just as the muscles of the body burn when pushed beyond their usual limits, so too does the mind resist prolonged attention. But this resistance is not a sign of limitation, it is a sign of growth. The discomfort that arises when you concentrate is simply the stretching of an underused faculty. And if you persist through that discomfort, not frantically, but faithfully, you will find that what once felt strenuous begins to feel natural. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once required discipline becomes a quiet habit. Look at the people who achieve mastery in any field. Their minds have been trained through years of repeated focus. Writers who sit before the blank page each morning, musicians who return to the same scales again and again, engineers who solve problems until their concentration becomes second nature. They did not begin with superior focus, they built it. They tolerated the boredom, the frustration, the urge to quit, and in doing so strengthened the very muscle that separates excellence from mediocrity. To build focus, you must introduce challenge intentionally. Sit with a task longer than your comfort allows. Resist the impulse to switch when the mind seeks escape. Commit to seeing a thought through to completion before moving to the next. These actions may seem small, but they add up, strengthening the mind in unseen but significant ways. Over time, the scattered thinker becomes the steady thinker. The overwhelmed becomes the composed. The distracted becomes the directed. A focused mind produces a focused life. It notices opportunities others overlook. It follows through where others abandon. It holds firm to purpose when others drift without aim. And because it is trained to concentrate, it becomes capable of deep work, work that changes circumstances, elevates potential, and brings forth results that seem remarkable to those who never learn to challenge their own minds. Mental focus is not a privilege reserved for the gifted. It is a discipline available to anyone willing to embrace the challenge that builds it. The stories you tell yourself shape the person you become, and this truth is one of the most quietly influential forces in a human life. Long before you take a step, speak a word, or make a choice, you are already being guided by an inner narrative, one that either strengthens your potential or slowly diminishes it. Most people never stop to ask themselves what story they have been repeating. They simply assume their thoughts describe reality, when in fact those thoughts are often shaping it. A story is not merely an explanation, it is a blueprint. And the blueprint you carry in your mind determines the structure of the life you build. Every person has an internal voice, a narrator, always speaking, always interpreting, always assigning meaning. When something goes wrong, that voice decides whether it is a setback or a signal. When an opportunity appears, it determines whether you are capable or unprepared. And remarkably, the story the mind chooses becomes the story the life follows. If you tell yourself you are unlucky, you begin to overlook the chances that arise. If you insist that nothing ever works out, you will act in ways that ensure that belief remains true. But if you carry the story of someone who adapts, grows, and perseveres, you will find yourself rising in moments where others fall. People often underestimate the power of narrative. They imagine their self-talk is harmless background noise, yet it is the very foundation upon which confidence, resilience, discipline, and courage are built. Words repeated inside the mind become beliefs. Beliefs become decisions. Decisions become habits. And habits become identity. You are, in many ways, living inside the echo of the story you've been telling yourself for years, whether that story lifts you or limits you. The beautiful thing about stories, however, is that they can be rewritten at any moment. You are not bound to the first draft. You are not required to inherit a narrative from your past. You are free to challenge every assumption and examine every belief that keeps you small. Ask yourself who told you that you couldn't. Who decided you weren't ready? Who declared your potential limited? Most of the time, the answer is simple: the story did, and a story is only as powerful as your willingness to keep telling it. Begin by paying attention to your inner dialogue. What do you tell yourself when you fail? What do you tell yourself when you succeed? What do you whisper in moments of doubt, in moments of pressure, in moments of decision? These quiet messages shape your behavior more than the loudest advice from the outside world. They create the boundaries you operate within and the possibilities you allow yourself to pursue. Once you become aware of these narratives, you can begin to introduce new ones, stronger ones, truer ones, ones that pull you forward instead of holding you back. Instead of saying, "I can't handle this," try, "I am learning to handle this." Instead of saying, "This always happens to me," try, "I am becoming someone who responds differently." You must speak to yourself in the language of the person you want to become, not the person you have been. Every meaningful transformation begins with a shift in story. Change the narrative and you change the thinker. Change the thinker and you change the life. Controlled thinking creates calm, and calm thinking creates clarity. This is a simple truth, yet it carries the weight of a lifetime's transformation. Most people move through their days caught in the turbulence of unchecked thoughts, rushing, reacting, fearing, imagining the worst, and wondering why peace feels so distant. They believe calm is granted by circumstance. That clarity arrives only when life slows down, when problems resolve, when everything finally settles. But calm is not the result of a quiet environment, it is the result of a quiet mind. And a quiet mind is not accidental. It is created through deliberate control of thought. The human mind has a natural tendency to accelerate. It jumps from one concern to the next, multiplying possibilities, rehearsing outcomes, magnifying problems. When left unchecked, it behaves like a river after heavy rain, swift, muddy, overflowing its banks, and in this state clarity becomes impossible. Decisions are rushed, emotions flare, and small challenges grow into towering obstacles. But the moment you take hold of your thoughts, slow them, direct them, choose them with intention, you begin to experience something extraordinary. The river calms, the waters clear, solutions that were once hidden now appear with unmistakable precision. Controlled thinking does not mean suppressing thoughts. It means guiding them. It means becoming the conductor rather than the audience. When you take a deliberate breath and choose where your mind will go next, you introduce order into what was once chaotic. You say to yourself, "This is the thought I will entertain. This is the thought I will release. This is the thought I will build upon." And with that simple act, calm begins to form. First as a moment, then as a habit, and eventually as a characteristic of your very nature. Calm is not weakness, it is strength under control. It gives you the ability to meet challenges without losing your center. It allows you to separate the real from the imagined, the urgent from the unimportant, the problem from the panic. A calm thinker sees clearly because they are not blinded by emotion. They respond rather than react. They observe rather than absorb. They decide rather than drift. Their clarity is not a gift, it is the reward of disciplined thought. Consider the great leaders, explorers, and innovators of history. Their success did not stem from perfect conditions. Many faced crisis, doubt, and uncertainty beyond what most will ever encounter. Yet what distinguished them was their ability to remain calm when others felt overwhelmed. They could assess situations without distortion. They could think when thinking mattered most. This was not a trait bestowed upon them at birth. It was the result of mastering the direction of their minds. To cultivate calm, begin with attention. Notice when your thoughts begin to race. Notice when emotion tries to take the lead. Rather than being pulled along, pause. Guide your thoughts back to what is true, what is useful, and what is within your control. Each time you do this, you strengthen the habit of controlled thinking. And as controlled thinking grows, calm settles in like a steady companion, bringing with it a clarity that sharpens your decisions, elevates your actions, and gives you the unmistakable power of a mind aligned with purpose. Calm is not found, it is created, and it begins with the simple discipline of choosing your thoughts with care. A powerful mindset does not avoid problems. It interprets them differently. This single shift in perception separates those who rise from those who remain anchored to their difficulties. Most people spend their lives trying to outrun challenges, hoping that if they move fast enough or pray hard enough, life will smooth itself out and grant them a clear, unbroken path. But life was never designed this way. Problems are not interruptions to the journey, they are part of it. And the way you interpret them determines whether they strengthen you or diminish you. When a person with an untrained mind encounters difficulty, they see only resistance. They feel as though life is working against them, and their first instinct is to retreat. They ask, "Why is this happening to me?" As though the challenge is a personal attack. But a person with a powerful mindset responds differently. They do not interpret difficulty as a signal to stop, but as an invitation to grow. They understand that every challenge contains information about their strengths, their weaknesses, their habits, and their beliefs. They look not at the size of the problem but at the opportunity concealed within it. A problem, in its simplest form, is a demand for a higher level of thinking. It is life asking you to become more than you were yesterday. To the unprepared thinker, the demand feels like strain. But to the prepared thinker, it feels like the next natural step. The challenge is not seen as a wall, but as a doorway, and whether or not the person walks through it depends entirely on the meaning they assign to it. The situation is the same. The interpretation is not. A powerful mindset does not pretend difficulties are pleasant. It simply refuses to let them define reality. Instead of saying, "I can't handle this," it says, "This is here to teach me something." Instead of asking, "Why me?" it asks, "What can I learn? How can this strengthen me? What does this make possible?" Such questions pull the mind out of fear and into awareness. They transform confusion into understanding and frustration into progress. And slowly, a new skill begins to form, the ability to remain stable in the presence of uncertainty. This shift in interpretation creates an inner balance that cannot be shaken easily. While others panic, the person with a powerful mindset thinks. While others resist the situation, they study it. While others feel defeated, they become curious. And within that curiosity lies the seed of resilience, because curiosity opens the mind and a closed mind cannot solve a problem. A powerful mindset stays open not to the possibility of failure but to the possibility of growth. Over time, something remarkable happens. The person realizes that problems do not shrink, they themselves grow larger than the problems. Their thinking expands, their tolerance strengthens, and their confidence deepens. They discover that what once overwhelmed them now barely unsettles them. Not because life changed, but because their interpretation did. A powerful mindset turns challenges into training, obstacles into lessons, and setbacks into stepping stones. It sees life not as a series of difficulties to endure, but as a lifelong classroom in which each experience, no matter how unwelcome, is another opportunity to sharpen the mind, strengthen the spirit, and rise to a higher level of living. You become unstoppable the moment you stop negotiating with your excuses, for excuses are the quiet thieves of potential. They wear many disguises: fatigue, uncertainty, self-doubt, timing, circumstance, and they whisper reasonable-sounding arguments into your mind until you accept limitation as truth. Most people do not fall short because they lack ability. They fall short because they enter into endless debates with their excuses, giving those excuses the authority to decide when and how they will act. But the person who stops negotiating, who ends the internal bargaining and steps forward with conviction, discovers a rare and remarkable power, the power of momentum born from clarity. Excuses rarely shout, they murmur. They arrive softly, offering comfort in place of challenge, delay in place of discipline. They tell you that tomorrow will be easier, that you need more time, that conditions must improve before you begin. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, they shape the architecture of your choices. Each negotiation strengthens them. Each negotiation weakens you. Before long, a person realizes they are living a life orchestrated by hesitation rather than intention. But something extraordinary happens when you decide, once and for all, that excuses will no longer be given a vote. You create a turning point. You replace indecision with action, doubt with direction, and hesitation with discipline. The moment you refuse to negotiate, your energy shifts from defending your limitations to pursuing your possibilities. You stop asking whether you feel ready and begin acting as though readiness is created through movement. And in doing so, you ignite a force within yourself that excuses cannot penetrate. The human mind contains infinite capacity, yet it becomes weakened when constantly interrupted by internal debate. Each time you wrestle with an excuse, you drain strength that could have been invested in the task itself. But the individual who eliminates negotiation becomes startlingly efficient. Their thinking becomes direct, their actions become simple. They do not waste time justifying inactivity or explaining delay, they move. And through movement they build competence. Through competence they build confidence. Through confidence they build momentum. And momentum, once formed, is one of the most powerful forces in human achievement. Most people wait for motivation to eliminate excuses for them, but motivation is fleeting. It rises and falls like the tide. What remains is discipline. Discipline formed by a decision that excuses are no longer acceptable companions. When you draw that line even quietly, something within you stands straighter. You feel a sense of authority over your own life. You realize that your time, your energy, your goals belong to you, not to the small internal voices trying to talk you out of your own potential. And as you walk this path, you begin to notice that excuses no longer tempt you in the same way. They appear, but they no longer persuade. They speak, but they no longer influence. You see them as they truly are remnants of an old mindset, powerless without your cooperation. And because you have stopped negotiating, your life begins moving in a straight, unwavering line toward the person you intend to be. In this way, becoming unstoppable is not about overpowering the world. It is about refusing to be overpowered by your own excuses. Your greatest freedom is the ability to choose what you will think next, and this freedom is far more powerful than most people realize. Many wander through life believing they are bound by circumstance, trapped by the events of the past, or dictated by the pressures of others. Yet in the quiet chamber of the mind, a profound liberty exists, one that no external force can take away. No matter the difficulties outside, no matter the restrictions imposed by society, no matter the mistakes that have been made, you can always choose your next thought. And in that choice lies the foundation for every success, every breakthrough, and every personal transformation. Consider how often the mind drifts without direction. A moment of fear, a flash of doubt, a lingering resentment. Any of these can take hold and shape the course of an entire day if allowed. But the person who recognizes their freedom in choosing the next thought steps out of the role of victim and into the role of architect. They pause even for an instant and deliberately select what to think, what to focus on, and what meaning to assign to the events around them. This is not merely a matter of positive thinking, it is the conscious exercise of mental authority, the recognition that life unfolds in alignment with the thoughts you actively cultivate. Every thought is a decision. It is a signal to your mind, your emotions, and ultimately your actions. When you choose a thought of purpose rather than distraction, you create momentum toward your goal. When you choose a thought of courage rather than fear, you open pathways that were previously hidden by hesitation. When you choose a thought of possibility rather than limitation, you expand your perception of what can be achieved. The freedom to choose does not erase difficulty, but it transforms how you meet it, how you respond to it, and how you integrate it into your journey. This freedom is continuous, instantaneous, and ever present. At any moment, regardless of past choices, you can direct your thinking in a new direction. You can abandon worry, replace doubt with confidence, and trade distraction for focus. No one can make this choice for you, and no one can prevent you from exercising it. It is the ultimate personal power, a power that surpasses wealth, status, or skill, because it shapes the very mind that directs every action, every decision, and every result. Those who master this freedom recognize the responsibility that comes with it. They do not let untrained impulses, fleeting emotions, or habitual reactions dictate their mental state. Instead, they pause, observe, and select the thought that best serves their purpose. This practice, repeated over time, builds clarity, resilience, and a life aligned with intention. It is the cornerstone of personal growth, for it ensures that no matter the storm outside, the mind remains the captain of the ship. To exercise this freedom is to claim ownership of your life in the truest sense. Each thought you choose is an act of creation, a brushstroke on the canvas of your existence, a step on the path you intend to follow. And as you practice this deliberate selection of thought, you begin to notice a remarkable transformation. The power that once seemed external, fleeting, or unattainable becomes rooted within, available at any moment, and capable of shaping a life of extraordinary meaning and achievement.